We're seeing the police being given gradually more and more powers and becoming more and more violent. The instances of police brutality have been skyrocketing. Virtual terrorism from the police with the use of tasers. Even here in Australia, as I mentioned a few shows ago, we saw a man tased 13 times in the presence of 9 police officers because he refused to submit to a strip search. The police officers were, I believe, given a light fine as a penalty for their excessive use of power. One might, on the other hand, ask what the penalty would be for 9 individuals were they caught torturing an individual because he refused to submit to sexual assault, because that is tantamount to what the police did, and the penalty that they received for their actions was definitely not fitting for the crime that they committed. So we are seeing these systems of control put in place everywhere. We're seeing the blatant promotion of microchips continuing and continuing. Companies such as IBM and Verichip very much seeking to make it acceptable for people to be microchipped, even make the proposition of being microchipped seem attractive to people. And eventually, I'm sure not too far down the track, we'll see certain services that will only be available to people who are microchipped. And this will be a way of promoting it to people as well, where you have to be microchipped in order to have the latest cool thing. And we are, of course, seeing the massive increase in chemical spraying and chemtrails, what the government refers to as geoengineering, which is, of course, nothing of the sort because it's been going on since at least the mid-90s and possibly even a good deal earlier. Now, folks, anybody who follows any esoteric research, any research into government corruption, government conspiracy, esoteric information, anybody who promotes any type of environmental activity, anybody who's concerned about the well-being of the planet, who's concerned about the pollution on the planet, who is concerned about any problem, then there really is something that unites all of these issues. And that is the implementation of global aerosol spraying, known as chemtrails, and, as I said, presented to us by the government as geoengineering. Folks, chemtrails is a real issue. When you look up into the sky and you see these huge trails going from horizon to horizon, these are not contrails. Contrails are condensation trails. Condensation, by its very nature, only lasts a very short time in warm atmosphere. And so it becomes very apparent that what we're seeing stretching out across the sky from horizon to horizon are not contrails, simply because of the nature of contrails. It's impossible for them to last that long, folks, because they're simply condensation. But despite this fact, the spraying of these chemicals in the sky is being ignored or given the cold shoulder by politicians all around the world. Recently in New Zealand, the New Zealand Prime Minister demonstrated his very likely single-digit IQ by claiming that chemtrails were a conspiracy theory, even though the British House of Commons has released a document saying that geoengineering is being carried out. And this man is so unintelligent that he honestly thinks that condensation just lasts forever in the sky and spreads out into clouds. I mean, it's incredible to think that this man runs a country. He's either a complete moron or he's a criminal who's in on it, but whatever he is, he's definitely unfit to hold the position that he holds. He was literally laughing at the person who brought it up and treating the whole thing as a joke, which is a very good indication of either the lack of his intelligence or his willingness to support an international criminal organization that is spraying the planet. And it is also a very clear indication of his sociopathic attitude, his sociopathic mentality, his unwillingness to think critically and objectively, and the disdain that he holds for not only himself and his family and the people of his country, but also the people of the world. But again, folks, it isn't that he's an evil man. It's simply that he's been through the education system. He's been indoctrinated into the social structure. He's been indoctrinated into the political system, which is an inherently corrupt system that is designed to squash all critical thinking, to squash all objectivity, to prevent people from ever thinking outside the box and to promote ridicule towards anyone who does. That's the way the system works. It's designed to produce sociopathic people. But you can't blame the people, because they're only this way because they've been indoctrinated into the system. They've been indoctrinated through the system. And if they have obtained their political position by participating in secret societies and handshakes under the table, then there's probably a lot darker reasons why they do what they do as well. In fact, I would suggest that many of these people are controlled energetically in some way or another. There's any number of ways of controlling people, but it's very interesting to see that very often when politicians get to any position of power, they instantly change, and they all ultimately seem to support the very same agenda, namely the further centralization of power and the further globalization of government. Now, just a few days ago, there was a film released by a man called Michael J. Murphy. Helping with the film was Edward Griffin, and the film is about geoengineering or chemtrails, and it's entitled What in the World Are They Spraying? And the film contains some very good research. I recommend that you Google it and look for the site where you can purchase the DVD. The DVD instructs you to then copy and distribute the information, so they're not doing it for the money, folks. It was also uploaded to YouTube by a YouTube user, and I have it embedded on thecrowhouse.com, and it's also listed as a playlist on my YouTube channel. I highly recommend that you watch this film and that you distribute it to as many people as you can. As I said, it does contain some very good research. For example, some of the results, and actually I saw some results like this a couple of years ago from the same area. I think I mentioned them on a show last year, middle of last year. And they are talking about test results from snow samples found on Mount Shasta. Now remember, folks, people go hiking on Mount Shasta and they melt the snow and they use it for water to make cups of tea, cups of coffee, and just to get water, so they've got water on their trip. Now, under normal conditions, the atmosphere is permitted to have 1 part per billion of aluminium in the atmosphere. Due to industry, this is what is an acceptable amount in the atmosphere, and this is what you are likely to find in rain that is formed in clouds and then rains down onto the ground as either water or snow. So 1 part per billion is acceptable, and the danger level for aluminium in the atmosphere is considered to be 1,000 parts per billion. Essentially, it would be considered an emergency if we found the atmosphere to be 1,000 parts per billion of aluminium. Well, folks, according to scientific results returned from Mount Shasta, the snow on Mount Shasta is showing an aluminium content of 61,000 parts per billion. And this exceeds the danger level by 60 times, folks. This is not good. We're finding lakes that are showing 39,000 parts per billion. We're seeing severe damage being done to the soil. We're seeing severe damage to plants, severe damage to animals. And if you think this isn't being planned, folks, and you think this isn't deliberate, then I would point out that we are also seeing companies such as Monsanto releasing new strains of genetically modified food that happen to be aluminium resistant. Now, folks, what we're seeing with these chemtrails, with these incredibly dangerous levels of aluminium that we're finding all around the place in our environment, the amount of trees that are dying because of this. And don't think that the results from Mount Shasta are just localized to Mount Shasta either, folks, because this spraying is going on virtually globally. It's going on here where I live. It's going on everywhere. So you'll be finding these levels of aluminium in water supplies and in soil samples that can be taken from just about anywhere in the world. And the politicians aren't addressing this issue. They're tying it up in paperwork. They've got people from Homeland Security and people from the Sheriff's Office and people from police stations going and confiscating organic food and raw cheese from people when we've got what is essentially the biggest crime against humanity that has ever been perpetrated, being carried out right now, right across the globe, by whoever is putting additives in fuel or whoever is spraying the planet. Because there is most certainly someone or something who is spraying the planet. Now this is what our police need to be addressing. And this is what everybody needs to be addressing, because we all have to breathe the air. If the very content of our air is not fit to breathe, then what hope do any of us have? What do any of the other issues matter if the air is not fit to breathe? And if the soil is not fit to grow healthy food or to support real life because of what's being sprayed into the atmosphere? Everybody's distracted with side issues. Everybody's distracted with wondering what's down the rabbit hole. Everyone's worried about their own little specific environmental concern. But no one's looking up and noticing what's happening in the sky. Now folks, it happens almost every night here after dark. We have clear skies here in the day, but the days are always somewhat hazy. But at night you can get up here at 4 o'clock in the morning and you can see the spraying in the skies, and it happens almost every night. The constant aerial spraying that the human race and this planet is being subject to, without anyone's knowledge or consent, and alerting people to the fact that this is actually occurring, is one of the most challenging situations we have ever faced, folks. But it's also a tremendous opportunity. We now have something that can unite the human race. It's a common issue that threatens every single man, woman and child on this planet. And for those who simply don't believe that this is chemical spraying, just explain to them what a contrail is. It's a condensation trail. Condensation evaporates. And I would also very much suggest showing them the film that I mentioned to you before by Michael Murphy and Edward Griffin, entitled What in the World Are They Spraying? You'll find links to it on my website. I think it's pretty close to break time here, folks, so I'll leave it there for now, and we'll go and have a break. Thanks for spending this time with me, and I'll talk to you again in a few minutes. And welcome back, folks. Now, before the break, I was discussing chemtrails. I was discussing the need to get this information out to the public and the need to address this situation. Chemtrails really is a situation that affects us all, folks, as is the introduction of genetically modified food. I've also heard recent reports coming out of Canada that pharmaceutical companies are attempting to take vitamin companies to court and actually have vitamins banned as being toxic substances. This is, of course, as a result of Codex Alimentarius. This is what Codex is all about, folks, is the banning of nutrition. And they've been working very hard to implement this for the last 30 or 40 years. And this is what we're also seeing with the confiscation of raw cheese that we're seeing across America, the raid on a family farm and the confiscation of 50,000 pounds of raw cheese that we saw in Missouri a couple of weeks ago, and now the confiscation of raw cheese again in Washington State that we saw last week. This is all a result of Codex Alimentarius. The FDA guidelines are basically inherited from Codex Alimentarius. These are criminal organizations run by very devious and very sociopathic men who are attempting to remove nutrition from the people, because when you control the food, you control the people. Control the food, you control everything, folks. And as I've previously said, this was also mentioned in the National Security Memorandum number 200 that was released in 1974, in which Dr. Henry Kissinger openly recommended using food as a weapon, and also stated that depopulation should be the highest priority of government if population levels affect the exploitation of resources. So this is pretty serious stuff, folks. We are losing our ability to be able to obtain healthy food. And this is being done deliberately. At the same time that this is being done, we are seeing chemicals being sprayed in the sky. We're seeing the implementation of genetically modified foods which will be resistant to the chemicals that are being sprayed in the sky. So you start seeing a whole big picture of what's going on. You start to see how this all ties together.